Welcome to RPI's CloudSuite Tech Talk series. My name is Keith Wayland, and I'm here to introduce today's presentation on building the business case for CloudSuite v11. Presenting today, we have Mr. Richard Lee Stout, who should be well known throughout the industry because he often presents, as well as myself. The thing about CloudSuite is it's not something you have to do, it's something you want to do. It delivers many wonderful benefits that are going to improve operations in your organization, and we're excited to share those with you today. If you like today's presentation, please be aware that we do Tech Talks every Friday at noon Eastern, and our schedule is available on the Work Out Loud events page. We welcome questions. If you have any, please type them into the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. We will take him at the end so as to not interrupt our flow. And with that, I give you Richard and myself. Good to see you, Mr. Stout.
It's great to see you, Mr. Wayland.
You excited to do today's presentation on the business case for CloudSuite?
Yeah, it's my favorite topic.
Awesome. Let's get to it.
All right.
So we have an agenda for today that's very helpful. We're going to be covering some of the challenges and opportunities around current state versus going to a modern ERP like CloudSuite, some of the risk of that project, some of the rewards, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to do an organizational self-assessment on what the business case is in particular to you.
Great.
So starting us off, let's talk about one of the big challenges of being, if you're currently on Lawson, what are some of the challenges that you're going to face?
Right. I think one of the biggest challenges is basically operating within an environment where other organizations in your industry have moved on to a more modern system, and that means that they're able to operate a little bit more efficiently. They're able to do more with less, and it puts your organization at risk not only of being outpaced by your competitors, but as you bring on new employees that have experience in your industry, they might find that the software you have in place is no longer meets the needs of the business the way they're used to running.
Clearly, and some of the core differentiators of this next generation of ERP are the fact that they are more process-oriented, right? They're not just transactional databases. They have an increased application footprint, right, that allows you to reduce some point solutions. And they are multi-tenant cloud-based, which means less maintenance and work internally for yourself, but also that the software vendor is able to provide a more competitive cost for the solution itself.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be digging into all three of those excellent points over the next 20 minutes or so.
Cool. Well, let's start with some of the process inefficiencies that are inherent into a transactional system like Lawson is today. These systems were originally designed as record holders, right? They're giant databases storing information. So they'll store your AP distributions and invoice record and payment, but they don't provide a process for routing that invoice for approval and making sure that it's valid and it's the correct amount. So a lot of us have built these things around the system, right? And that's something that repeats itself over and over. There's a lot of inefficiencies in a transaction-driven solution. I also think there's a unique opportunity here for the Lawson market that I want to make sure we mention, which is most of these implementations occurred 20, 25 years ago. A lot of them driven around Y2K, and some of the decisions that people made when they first implemented, they've been having to live with since forever, right? The single company versus multi-company, the levels of the accounting unit, things that take a lot of effort to change, that now is an opportunity that they can revisit, but also some decisions that were made based on a lack of flexibility in the original system. You got to remember that CloudSuite is different. It's new, but it's based on that DNA. It shares that heritage, and it was designed by consultants that were going out in the field and learning of these limitations, right? So it by its very nature, it overcomes some of them. Another thing that I think is an inherent issue with Lawson and other old school ERPs is the fact that we're so used to having to get data out of the system in order to report on it, right? Extract it, mash it together. A lot of organizations have centralized reporting or IT departments supporting these processes, which makes them inefficient. What is the process? I need this. Okay, let me show you what that looks like. Oh, I need to change it right? It's just so antiquated and old school.
Imagine you're a business analyst having to put a request into IT to get a data extract and wait for that to be pulled out and delivered, right? That's so inefficient.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not just inefficient, it's a poor experience for that analyst. That's not their expectation of what the workplace is going to be like in 2020, 21, or going forward.
I mean, it's a limiting factor that probably prevents a lot of ad hoc analysis from taking place because, you know, if you have to think through how much trouble it's going to be just to get the data, is it really worth spending the time to explore and play with that data to see if any insights come to light?
And it makes the analyst sad. You want to know what makes me sad? Is how much money organizations spend to support the internal hardware, right, to run these on-prem systems. They're doing server migrations, they have full-time system administrators, right? This is not your core competency of your business is running Lawson, or, you know, if it is, it's sort of a strange business model.
Right.
You want to focus your organizational capital and resources on things that are going to improve you as a business.
Yeah, I mean, I think it speaks to the success of the sales organizations within the IT industry over the past 20 years that they've convinced everybody that they need to run their own data centers and sort of, you know, invest in the never-ending cycle of hardware upgrades and,
Yes.
you know, and buy all sorts of infrastructure software, server operating systems, hypervisors, management software. You know, none of that really belongs within a hospital or a utility or a local government.
To quote Infor, friends don't let friends build data centers.
Yeah.
So let's talk about another, plague on our current IT society here, the burn up point solutions. What can you tell us about that?
Right. Well, you mentioned that, you know, the legacy ERP systems are basically glorified databases, and that means you need a whole bunch of other software wrapped around those databases to provide a complete business solution. And, you know, that's been done by single purpose or niche applications that bolt on and integrate with your core ERP system. And over time, organizations have accumulated a great number of those. I mean, we've talked to IT directors that manage 200 plus different applications in their portfolio, and that just seems crazy. That, you know, one department would have to be responsible for a triple-digit number of applications that all need to work together and exchange data.
Yeah.
And that means that it's a never-ending job just keeping the plate spinning, right? Just keeping all those individual applications up to date and speaking to each other and keeping those interfaces working. It's a game that can never be won.
And you know, some of these aren't always the byproduct of a cohesive IT strategy. Sometimes it's the business saying, I absolutely need to have this functionality. This is the only way I can deliver it. And if you can't prove otherwise, you know, you're stuck supporting one more application.
Right.
So we've painted this this hellscape. The good news is that, you know, with our challenges, there are opportunities. So maybe we could talk a little bit about some of those opportunities. I think one of the big ones that I hit on a little bit earlier is, yes, you get to move to a modern platform that has all the features and functionality you would expect and the process-centric efficiencies, but I think there's also an opportunity here to leverage that intellectual capital your organization has built over 20, 25 years to make better core decisions, right? So average life cycle of an ERP is 20, 25 years. You're going to live with a system for a long time. If you do CloudSuite correctly, it'll be a culture of continuous improvement where you continue to get more and more out of it, right? Where you empower your users to make it better. And what's important is when the folks implemented Lawson, they didn't have all this knowledge going into it. And while CloudSuite is different, I mean, it is similar in some ways. There's a lot that your organization can bring to the table that I don't feel like they could bring to the table starting from scratch elsewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's an excellent point.
It's very similar.
That's an excellent point, is that super users have so much to contribute to an implementation design now, where a lot of organizations' experience with implementing Lawson was they basically let the consultants make all the choices.
This is what the consultant told me.
Yeah.
All right, what else we got? So let's talk about total cost of ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've hit that point that friends don't let friends build data centers. So that's a pretty easy calculation there. As you can take a look at the cost of the hardware, the software, the maintenance, everything that's involved in keeping the applications running on-prem versus up in the cloud. But there's also some soft costs there that I think potentially could make even more of an impact by being able to refocus your attention of, I mean, you've got some system administrators who are probably some really smart people, and they probably really understand your business in a way that
few people do
that consultants can't really grasp because they don't live it day in and day out, right? And while system administration is still a client role, the SaaS delivery means that your IT team can spend their time making the application work better for the business.
Absolutely. I think another really important thing when you look at CloudSuite is just the robustness of the reporting. And this really has two major factors that drive this. One is the ability to set up GL dimensions, which are indexed. So you no longer have to work around the limitation of your account unit activity to track different information and to be able to pull it through the self-service tools, which I think is the second piece. It's designed for your super users to easily access information. A lot of things that in the past you would have built a crystal report and then built a distribution around and needed someone with crystal expertise, people can just get straight from the system in a logical manner. When we talk about things like list views, that's not running a vendor listing. That's a filtered, on-screen, real-time list that you can join stuff to. That's super intuitive to use, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think that there's a lot to be saved there. And as Aaron Epps, our friend, likes to say, so much time is wasted putting in these requests to get information. What do you want the information for? You want to enable people to make timely decisions, and being able to get their own information quickly is what's going to allow that.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody puts in a request for a 10,000 row report because they're going to read all 10,000 rows.
That's right.
It's because they're going to summarize it and do some analytics on it.
Much easier to filter on a CloudSuite than on a PDF.
And one of the things about CloudSuite is workflow is really core to the application. And this is a pretty big change from older systems, right? So Lawson offered Infor process automation, which is a stellar workflow product, but it runs alongside the business application rather than within it. And CloudSuite apps were built from the ground up around workflow. It's integral. And unlike Lawson's IPA, the majority of delivered flows are a good fit for typical business processes, right? That means that a lot of flows within CloudSuite can simply be enabled and ready for use. Let me give you a couple of examples. Over on the financial side, there are two request and approval processes that we've made a part of basically every financials implementation because they run so well out of the box. And these are two processes that really weren't even possible in Lawson. It's request new item and request new vendor. And those are powered by IPA flows, but you really don't need to edit those flows to make effective use of those processes.
Right? There's no reason not to. And I think another one that I've heard a lot, spoken of over the years, is like a journal entry approval, right? So journal entry approval process, I need to get IT involved to build out an IPA flow and then maintain it. In CloudSuite, it's delivered, right? Your super users can turn this on, test it, put it out there in no time at all. So it doesn't become an IT request, and it doesn't become an IT maintenance, which is really nice. And there are hundreds of them.
Yeah, and as we talk about approvals, one of the things that's really important with an approval process is the application needs to know, who has the authority to approve what kind of transactions and who needs to see what kind of transactions, right? And in the past, every approval system that's been bolted on to Lawson, whether it be IPA or on-base or separate imaging system, basically has had to store that logic within its own configuration in its own way. And those have been really disconnected from the core HR application. So one of the things I really like about CloudSuite HCM, and several of our clients are really starting to reap the benefits of this here, is that moving beyond just HR records management that's really based around the financial details that are needed for payroll, CloudSuite HCM offers the option to drive enterprise system access and provisioning or approval workflows outside of HR over in finance supply management. And this is possible because with Global HR and CloudSuite HCM, you have the ability to model the real life people relationships right within the HR application and start to let that HR application drive anything involving staff really outside of the HR realm.
And have it be a matrix, multi-tiered, have flexible levels of depth. I don't know how many times over the last 15 years you've been involved in a conversation about rec approvals or AP approvals, invoice approvals, where you say, well, can't we use your HR supervisory structure to determine who approves it? And the answer was always, well, that doesn't really match what our approval is going to look like.
Right, exactly.
Now it can.
Now it can. So we're doing that with a couple of clients now. And what that means is when there's a change in position, when somebody moves or somebody's terminated, those changes are automatically going to flow through to all these other processes, right? Their system access is going to change. They're going to be, maybe removed from an approval matrix and automatically bring in who the new correct approver is in that position. It doesn't kick off this domino effect of manual updates that need to be done.
Reducing so many touch points, and specifically, let's dive into one that you're very passionate about, which is invoice approvals, which is something that we've worked a lot with many organizations over the last 2 decades.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was a big part of the work that I got to do when I first started here with RPI Consultants, was helping with the shared services and sort of accounts payable department consolidations that were happening within the industry. And sure, at the time, Lawson being the financial system, there's nothing on AP 20 that tells you what to do to release the invoice, right? It's like that needs to be in the minds of all your AP processors. It's total night and day here with CloudSuite. So I do think it's one of the biggest wins in CloudSuite financials, other than the new GL, and that's that the payables has become a real solution now. It's a perfect example of how CloudSuite is based on workflow-driven processes, because tracking the status of an invoice within the AP process is no longer a bolt-on, it's core to the applications. And what we found is that most organizations will roll out non-PO invoice approval using the delivered workflow.
Yeah.
The one that comes right within the system. It's super easy to turn on, and it's
flexible.
It's flexible because if you do have more complex approval needs, you can go in and sort of edit the underlying IPA flow. And the other sort of half of that equation, right? We've got workflow that surrounds our AP data. What about the imaging, right? So Infor OS, which is sort of the shared technology foundation for all CloudSuite apps, includes a highly capable sort of general all-purpose document management solution. And it's got some really nice integration within to the payables module. So that makes it easy for processors and approvers to basically see a picture of that invoice right on the same screen as the data that they're working with.
It's amazing, all those countless projects and hours that we spent basically building that now essentially come out of the box. Another area that I'm very passionate about in terms of new functionality is the benefit enrollment process, which it did exist in Lawson S3 in ESS, but it was ugly and it was clunky and
required a ton of customization work every year.
Well, some organizations went the customization route. Some organizations just outsourced it altogether, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for someone else to manage their open enrollment process. And with CloudSuite, you get delivered a modern user experience that doesn't have all these extra continues and weird things, and that is easy to edit and attach information to, so that the relevant benefit information can be there. A couple of really nice things, addition to that, is you can start the process and save it, because maybe you're not ready to go start to finish when you open that. Maybe you need to speak to your spouse about some of the options.
Or look some stuff up online, because not for people that aren't terribly familiar with with health insurance and other kinds of benefits. It's challenging enough making the right selections for you and your family. You shouldn't have to be encumbered by a difficult to use software application at the same time.
Right, exactly. But not only that, on the back end, the administration of it allows you to monitor how many folks have finished, how many folks have started, how many folks are in process and they have it, and easily broadcast out to them follow-ups, right? So it makes the process of gathering this. I mean, I know even here at RPI, we have to follow up with a lot of folks to make sure that they finish it. That can be a real nightmare when you're talking about organizations that have 5, 8, 10,000 employees.
Yes.
There's some other stuff too. We're not going to hit on all of it, but maybe you can highlight some. There's a lot of features here.
Yeah, there's a ton, and any one of which might not seem like a huge deal. And of course, not everything's going to be applicable to all clients, but taken together, I think these combine to really push the overall solution forward, and are a major differentiator from last generation's COBOL-based ERPs.
Absolutely. And lastly, I'm going to talk again about this whole thing of point solutions. Point solutions are not going to go away, but there's a range, right? So the concept of I'm going to have a single ERP and it's going to do everything has been dated for a while, and I think that's acknowledged. But the concept of I'm going to have a different solution for each piece and 1,000 integrations and interdependencies, I mean, that's become overwhelming as well, right? Yeah. So I think it's about finding that right happy medium, and that starts with a foundation that's going to take care of 80, 90% of your needs, right? And yes, it's possible that there are some things that another point solution will do slightly better, but you're going to lose that in the integration, in the maintaining parallel systems, in the keeping them in sync, in the different upgrade cycles, and then getting them to talk to each other, right? This integration, you can build things, for example, in your talent acquisition system that just come over to your HR system of record. Right. You can build competencies over in HR that you're using both to promote people from within and to manage the performance, and also to resource them for jobs, right? So it's not just that I'm not interfacing data, is I'm using common underlying foundations across the application.
Yeah.
And that, to me, it's very powerful. Again, you'll still find some point solutions that you want to bolt on, but you start from that solid base, and then you have a few integrations, not 200.
I'm glad you brought up competencies, because that is really the best example to explain why
the benefit of an integrated solution.
Why a fully integrated system with everything working together, speaking the same language, right? Everything working with the same set of data elements is able to bring insights together that really can't be done even with the Ferrari of performance appraisals if it's not interacting with the same competencies and bringing those insights in. That's not going to power your succession planning, for example.
Right, and at the Ferrari of point solutions, it costs a lot of money every year too, right? And here it's included, so there's that too. So we have here to talk about some risks, and the risks we have here are focused on risk in implementing CloudSuite, which we're going to talk about in a second. But should we be talking about what is the risk for me just staying on Lawson, just sticking it out an extra 5, 10 years if I can?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's talk about the technical back end, right? Because I know that for some organizations considering a move to the cloud, there's some hesitation of sort of not being under control of the underlying hardware or data center that's running. It feels like maybe there's a bit of a risk here in not managing and owning all the infrastructure. But I feel like there's a bit of a false sense of security because
Absolutely.
Even organizations that have invested in a robust disaster recovery plan, we have seen that those have not really been maybe as fail-safe as everybody has thought. And there's always the risk of a hardware failure or some system failure that you're still basically on the hook of waiting for an IT vendor to come in and support, maybe to replace a failed NAS controller in your data center, or to supply a software patch for something, right? So there's always risk in keeping mission critical applications up and running. And the way that organizations have managed that risk is by having a great team of people who are, fast thinkers, great troubleshooters, experts in the application, right? And as the world moves on from these legacy applications, I think that talent pool is going to be reduced as people retire. It's going to be a little bit more challenging making sure that you are staffed with the right skills you need to keep all these systems running.
So what I'm hearing is eventually your system administrator is going to retire, and you're going to be able to find someone to substitute him, and you also got to worry about disaster recovery. But what about just plain security? I mean, who's more secure, you or Amazon?
Right. I do believe that the cloud applications are more secure because they have dedicated teams and they have the most advanced testing available, and they're just taking that practice to another level, which really needs to be done in this world because you or I, we don't have the skills and capabilities to stand up to like the
cutting edge Amazon.
Yeah, the modern hacker that's out there and wants to pull our data out and sell it to the highest bidder. You really need people that are dedicated to that practice, and those kind of people want to work for companies like Amazon. They don't want to come work for us.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, I think there's some risk too with the implementations. Basically for me, they come in three varieties. One is that your project goes off the rails and you spend a lot of money and you don't get to the other side. That's obviously a risk that you want to try to avoid. Plan, find the right partner, make sure you understand what you're taking on, have a realistic budget. The second is that you go through this opportunity that comes around every couple of decades, and you don't take advantage of it to clean up your master data, to rethink your GL HR structure.
Right.
If this is an IT-driven project where you can't get the business to engage, you probably should wait, right? You need the business to engage. You need people to take advantage of this opportunity so that you can build that infrastructure for those next 20, 25 years. But then there's a third one, which is you sort of meander through the project, you get to the other side, but your users are demotivated by the end of it, right?
Right.
Good CloudSuite project should have people excited that now they can do their job better, they can do better things, they're empowered, they can keep exploring and expanding the functionality and focusing on process improvement instead of transactions. So those to me are the risk. I think this is a great solution, but I would not slam it in. Slamming it in is just wasting a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, friends don't let friends lift and shift.
Friends don't let friends lift and shift. So let's talk about some of the rewards here. What are the gets from a dollar perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about not having to run all the infrastructure, right? So you're spending less time and money running a data center, and on the flip side, you are able to basically operate more efficiently, right? We can do more with less because it takes less human power to basically just do day-to-day transactions.
To push the transactions through.
Right. When the system is basically automatically moving transactions through their life cycle and interacting with people when it requires a person to make a decision. Rather than
you can focus on exceptions, you can focus on throughput. Right?
Exactly. Right.
Analysis.
Right. It's that shift to an exception-oriented process rather than having to touch every single record.
Awesome. I think there's some competitive advantages that come with it too, right? And I something that Stout's harped on here a couple times is you want your folks to want to work, and part of that is the system they interact with, right? So if they're interacting with something that to them looks like it got teleported straight from the 80s, or
have you ever tried to teach a Gen Z how to use Portal?
I have not.
It's not pretty.
It's not pretty, right? So they're looking for something more intuitive, and they're looking to be empowered, right? The workforce wants to have information that they can get, they can analyze, they can process, and not a bureaucracy to try to get anything that's useful out of the system.
Yeah, and I mean, now more than ever, the application can't be chained at people's desks either, right? It needs to work
It needs to
where
follow.
people work.
Yep. Yeah, now more than ever. So, taking some of this information, a lot of this I think is global, it's going to apply to everyone. But if you're looking at your organization specifically and saying, okay, what is the business case in my organization for CloudSuite? We have a couple things that we recommend when you go look through that.
Yeah, absolutely. As you've mentioned, this isn't really an IT-driven thing, right? So it's important that all business areas that are going to be impacted sort of have a seat at the table. And now is the time to start by talking about where does Lawson work or where does Lawson fall short, right? Like, what are the pain points with the business applications that are in place today that maybe could be solved as part of a CloudSuite move? You want to identify those opportunities to automate where you can, and also, start taking a look at some of those point solutions that are out there and look for candidates to possibly retire and start moving that functionality within the application.
I think it's an excellent message that especially if you're in IT, you're the system owner, you got to go engage with those business users, because it's not always on the surface what the things are. For example, payroll's a common one. It works. People are getting paid. It's not broken. But then you talk to the payroll department, they say, oh man, we spend 30 hours gathering all this data, massaging it 3 ways from Sunday, analyzing before we put it in, because there's so many pieces to this process that are broken, right? So it's like, it works because you have a lot of manpower that you're putting behind it to make it work every time. And the minute one of those folks is out and you don't have someone else to step in, you'll feel that pain, right? So it's learning those things, learning about what your reporting constraints are. I think it's important, and seeing which ones can get fixed. Additionally, you want to go through a bit of a pre-planning exercise to get yourself ready to launch the CloudSuite project. And that means, at a high level, figuring out what's the right scope for your organization. What's your timeline roadmap, right? Like, where does it make sense to start migrating to CloudSuite, and possibly phasing that out if you're talking about bringing over, a 3-suite Lawson application, your medium to large size entity. There are probably a handful of different paths that you could take in terms of phasing and timing. So start laying out that roadmap, seeing where you get consensus within your organization, what makes sense for the different times of year. Consider other enterprise application upgrades or changes within the enterprise IT infrastructure that might coincide. Like, for example, we talked about lining up a payroll implementation maybe alongside a time and attendance system, since there's interdependencies between those two things, right? So figure out what the high-level timeline and scope is, and then start looking at, what are all of the development artifacts that potentially need to be brought forward, right? And a lot of those are going to be interfaces, because obviously moving to the cloud, it still requires a lot of interfaces to other systems, and the technology that's used for interfaces to cloud-based systems is pretty different. So that's something you can start cataloging now. Ultimately starting to get a handle on what that work effort is going to be, because it might be significant, and you really want to know what level of staff augmentation or external help you might require, and during which phases of the project, right? So that, along with any customizations that might be mission critical, big ticket reporting or analytics needs that might be mission which
critical.
hopefully will be out of the box from CloudSuite, but you want to understand if they are, if you're going to need to work through some of those.
And then finally, start thinking through what kind of data conversion needs you might have. Obviously, all master type data needs to be present in CloudSuite on day one of go live. But when it comes to transactional data, there are different options there. And it's not a blanket statement of, I want to bring over 3 years, or I want to bring over no data, right? It's like, by module, there are different pros and cons to bringing forward historical or open transactions, and it's really worth the time to explore what those options are, and start thinking through what makes sense for this project, and kind of have a good idea of that before really getting started on a CloudSuite project.
Yeah, if you want to know more about how to scope out what this effort might look like at your organization, we actually did a presentation a couple of months ago. I think it was CloudSuite 105 on pre-planning. That was really excellent and well received.
Yeah. I believe it's got over 10,000 views on
10,000 views.
Yeah.
1 million views. So yeah, and then I think you can do a value analysis based on, what are the savings. The operational ones might take a little effort, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, multiply times that you're spending, producing reports or
Sure.
resources dedicated to system administration. Get some pricing from Infor on what that SaaS licensing is going to look like, and some services estimates. And obviously, you got the hardware you're going to save, you got the support costs related to the hardware, and you got the costs related to, maintaining these point solutions is not just the administration and the support costs, it's the upgrades and the integrations and the professional services around them. Mm-hmm. Some of these things you might end up paying extended maintenance costs, sometimes for hardware, sometimes for software systems if you don't get off on time. So there's a lot of hard dollars out there that you should be able to save along the way by getting on a more consolidated platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the easy part of the calculation, and then I would argue that the greater impact is probably a little bit harder to quantify up front. But I think at this point we can start to look at some of the leaders within our industries of organizations that might have made an earlier jump to modern systems and are already starting to see some of the
benefits. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Stout. I guess we'll open it up and see if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, can't wait. Hit us.